Welcome to the Locknote closing session for Black Hat Europe 2022. Give yourself a round of applause. You've lasted this long. So you are the most diehard of the diehards that are toughing it out till the end. So we're going to try to entertain you and try to make you think a little bit differently. And we're going to have a conversation on some topics and just explore some areas around technology, maybe some social issues, and then we'll open it up to questions from the audience. And so the idea is, if you're not familiar, is we're just trying to have a conversation, and you just happen to be in the room watching it, and then at some point you get involved. And so it's no real pressure. It's just meant to be a nice way to wind down the conference in a more conversational way, trying to put a lot of things in context instead of trying to have one more one-to-many kind of speech. So with that said, I'm going to start with my left, and the review board members are going to introduce themselves and kind of give you just a brief context of their perspective, and then we'll start off with our first secret subject that they don't know about.
So, hi, I'm Jiska Classen. I'm a researcher at the Secure Mobile Networking Lab of TU Darmstadt. And so I hand over.
Hi everyone. My name is Federico Maggi from Italy. I'm an ex-academic who moved to the industry about 6 years ago. Now I'm working as a security researcher and happily review board member for Black Hat Europe.
Hello, my name is Leigh-Anne Galloway. I'm an independent security researcher with specialism in payment systems.
Hello everyone, I'm Anant Shrivastava. I work on a research firm mainly focused around mobile security. Over to you.
Fantastic. Okay, well, the easy first question is going to be around what we saw this morning with our keynote, which sort of built on Daniel's talk. And so Jen was talking a lot about what we can do to try to make the internet safer. And that seemed to involve a lot of personalizing, getting personal involvement, taking time out of your business or corporate responsibilities to try to engage with policymakers or raise awareness. What did you guys, I'll start on my left. What did you take away from that? What did you think, did it resonate with you, or does it feel like it's very hard for people in our community to engage and make the internet better? And so instead we just withdraw into like our technical bubble because that's what we know and understand.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Like, I've been asking myself, what can I do? Like, to whom can I speak? I don't really see myself in policy making. Like, I think it's not so much my strength, but at least like communicating with journalists, telling people stuff in a way that's easily accessible. Like, I do teaching a lot, so how do I tell not only technically advanced people something? No, thank you. Yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah, so how do I tell stuff to people in a way they understand it, even if they're non-experts?
Okay, good.
So, and would you go out of your way to do that, or is it just sort of when it happens you would take the opportunity?
A little bit as an addition. I mean, it means a lot of effort if you have, even if you have a talk here, you can either choose to make it accessible to beginners, or you just say, I don't care, Black Hat people, the visitors here are experts, I skip the introduction, I only have 30 minutes.
Yeah, go right to the...
It's a decision that you can do and that you can put effort into.
Yeah.
What I really liked of Jen's speaking and the way she suggested that we take a little time out of our professional engagements or daily job, maybe just with a colleague or one or two colleagues, to explain them why a certain thing is security relevant or not. Because that's, I think, is the most ubiquitous and pervasive way to raise awareness. Because yes, you can run training, you can run cyber initiative to promote awareness of consumer or non-security people, but I think that the one-to-one communication at the workplace, in the workplace, is much more applicable to reality, and everyone, any of us, can do it. You don't have to be a good trainer to suggest your colleague to do this and that.
I have a slightly different opinion.
Great.
Which is, I do think we all have a responsibility to educate those around us. But the most significant changes in security are fed down through policy. And so this is really important, is it's not just about us as individuals, but about having this conversation with policymakers, which she did touch on. And this is how we change security fundamentally for everyone.
So this is the thing that, good point. The thing that really frustrates me is we're sort of powerless. We're kind of in the middle. So it's either top-down, like you mentioned, it's a regulation, it's an act of the state, or it's the person or the company closest to the levers of power. So for example, a lot of things will never get better unless Apple or Microsoft or Google makes them better. Like we can invent every product in the world to put on top of the operating system, but ultimately, unless the operating system improves, we're kind of standing still. And so we're sort of in the middle. We don't create the policy, the regulation, and unless we are on the development team at Microsoft or Facebook or wherever, it's not getting better either. And so we're kind of stuck in the middle, and that we get all the arrows. Oh, the security community, you can't fix anything. It's like, yeah, but it's not, I'm not there at Microsoft fixing the thing. And so I think we might have either have oversized expectations for what we're capable of. Like, hey, it's not my fault that Facebook can't fix their two-factor authenticate, right? Love to help them. But, so I'm wondering if we're also setting ourselves up for disappointment, and we're accepting all these inbound arrows that really don't belong to us, right? They should go toward manufacturers.
How do you get there? How do you get there?
To the manufacturers?
Yeah, to incentivize internally to do good.
Right. So maybe if it was more around. I hate to say this, but there have been some successful campaigns around naming and shaming. Like, hey, how come this feature? Or the company's prioritizing 50 different things. And so you're trying to influence them to say, oh, well, I'll just prioritize number 23 and I'll make it number 5, and then it'll get fixed sooner, right? And so maybe don't feel guilty when there's another outbreak. Maybe work harder to try to convince them to improve, right, security. Right.
So there's one angle which a lot of people basically miss out. We are cynical by nature. One of the other person also said the same thing. The nature of job makes us cynical. But the problem is we only point flaws. We keep finger pointing, this is wrong, that is wrong, that is wrong.
Right.
We never have solutions. We are never on the table to discuss the solution.
Unless you're the developer on the team at the company, right? So we're just admiring the problem.
Yes.
But it's also so much fun.
It is fun.
Break things. Like I just look, I broke it. Can you fix it? Yeah. It's fun.
No, but that breaking and forcing them to fix is something that has actually moved the needle, which is very unfortunate.
Yeah. But then let's take case of, say, Twitter. There were problems there. People found that things are not working the way they want. They built Mastodon, they built ActivityPub and whatever systems, and they kept experimenting with it. That kind of an effort is something that maybe what the security industry needs to start doing. Build solutions, build some POCs, put them forward, focus on the solution aspect rather than just...
But does that pay the mortgage?
Yeah, exactly. There isn't an incentive to build
there is,
thing.
I mean, unless you have goodwill in your heart,
what is
you're not getting paid.
What is that saying? You'll never convince a man as long as his paycheck is...
From the miseries.
Yeah, is tied to not understanding the problem. Yeah. Okay, so then my question then on that is, you were talking a little bit about incentives, and there's also been some work on nudging, right? So you're either nudging people in the correct direction to make the right action, or you're incentivizing them, or whatever. What you're trying to do is incrementally, when and where you can, have people change their behaviors. But when you look at a lot of UIs and web experience, it's all dark patterns and anti-patterns and trying to trick users into accepting the tracking cookie. And so I am a little bit skeptical about the incentives. And I used to be a big believer in them. And then I thought the insurance company was going to provide the economic incentives. Companies would choose a better product because the insurance companies have forced them to say they'll get lower rates. They'll do the economically rational thing. Then consumers will buy the thing, like buying the Volvo because you want the safe, the airbags. But that's never happened. And so if it's not insurance and it's not rational consumers, who are we nudging? Now we're talking about nudging regulators, policymakers to do the things that we can't do, right? So we're pursuing nudging, it's just we keep changing the audience.
Yeah, that's kind of what we're doing. We're trying to nudge everything possible. We're trying to put the stick everywhere, whatever works, whatever gets us to the final destination. And so far, I think we've exhausted a lot of options, not much progress. And like Leigh-Anne was mentioning, policy could be a way. We've seen that happening with GDPR. We've seen that happening with a bunch of other policies. So that could be the way to move forward.
I want to throw in something else here. Do we have a good conversation with software engineers? Like each of us who has worked as a security researcher or vulnerability researcher remembers having a good, productive conversation with a software engineer to help them understand what could be the good consequences of their knowing what happens when their software gets abused.
Yeah, when the incentive model, when you have these giant when you have these giant like hyperscalers like Google, and their incentive model is to reduce network latency, right? More interactivity. You end up with things like, well, we're not going to do certificate pinning, we're not going to do DANE, what we're going to do is certificate transparency. So after your horses have run out of the barn, we'll tell you your horses are out of the barn with certificate transparency, right? After you've already suffered the harm, we'll let you know. There's a lot of data to collect around that. They can analyze it, they get all this telemetry, they can study the web. That's great. But as a small business, I want the barn door to be very secure and stay closed. So I like certificate pinning, and I like DANE. I like all the things that Google didn't like because it was cumbersome or slower or didn't give them the analytics that they wanted. But because they have so much outsized weight, and they have Chrome, they just throw out what they don't like, they throw in what they do like, and the rest of the world, right, not necessarily what's more secure, but what's better for them. And you feel as like the little person, we don't have that much, like I said, that much influence, because we're not
leverage.
So I want to see, by show of hands, people in the audience, even though I can't see you. During Black Hat here, how many people are either looking for a job, change jobs, or are hiring? I wanted to see what the job churn is. Very
few.
Oh, there's some. Yep.
Some.
Okay, by show of hands, how many people are totally happy where you're at and you're not looking to move? Wow.
That's nice.
A lot more are happy where they're at than looking to turn. So my question, my follow-up question for the panel here is then community versus industry. So Black Hat, we're pretty much a community. DEF CON, Chaos Computer Club, B-Sides, right? Community, more community focused. But that doesn't necessarily pay your mortgage, right? Yeah. A lot of people come into the industry now through television or they read a book and they're like, I can get paid. It's paying well, the stocks are growing, and they don't necessarily come for community or to comment on the latest legislation. They come
to make money.
To make money and grow their family. Do you see do we have a problem sort of socializing people into quote unquote the community, or is this normal? Like automotive makers, there's people that are passionate about making automotives, and there's people who are just there to like assemble the thing and go home. Is this a thing we should worry about?
I mean, I would imagine it's applicable to other industries. Yeah. The biggest question I have around that is whether it will still motivate and drive creativity, critical thinking, or whether it will push individuals in a slightly different direction.
So my perspective is this is a common pattern across every industry that you take. There are people who are passionate about things. There are people who are there to do the job. Does not necessarily means that they won't be creative. They'd be creative between 9 to 5. 5, they'll switch off. They'll go back home, live the life with the kids, with the family, and whatever. So that's the reality that we all have to accept. If the industry needs to grow, if we keep talking about skill shortage, resource shortage, if we want to fill that gap, We need people who are here to work. And those people, a lot of them would not care about how good the community is, or even if the community exists. They don't care about it. They're here to do the job, they'll do the job, and they'll move on. And what I see is we should not be hostile towards that attitude. If we want to keep moving forward, keep growing forward, that's the attitude we can accept. That yes, this is the reality. Some of us are passionate, not everyone is. And that's fine.
Yeah, I can see that sometimes in the new generation. Sometimes I mentor Italian students who want to go abroad for this association, and I can roughly make a 50% split between students who come to me and say, what's the fastest way to get into security and find a good internship in a top tech company? And the other half are like, let's talk. Tell me what you do, why you like your job, and so on, right? And usually I answer both of them with the same answer. I say, try to look around the community, try to orient yourself into what we do, into what conferences, and so on. And then what I get is the 50% who came with an open mindset. They keep going with open mindset. And in the first 50% who came with, I want to do an internship, I would say that another half of them will stick to ask me, yes, but I want to do an internship. And then maybe 25% I sort of convert them into thinking first about what they really want to do.
Your comments reminded me of in the early days of the internet, cybersecurity sort of revolution, there was this big split in the people that were sort of professionally creative and naturally creative, right? Mm-hmm. And this is kind of something that happened in the, I guess you would say the 40s or the 50s in America in the ad industry, where people who would create advertisements, and that's because they were great at it, and then it became an industry, right? You cranked out advertisements, you had to be professionally creative. Every day of the week, you had to go to Disney or wherever, and you had to make, creative pieces of art. And the same thing sort of happened with hackers. There's people that incredible exploitation or understanding, but they can't do that every day. That's not their thing. Mm-hmm. And so then you had this split between the, quote unquote, the sellouts, right? The anti-sec movement. Oh, you're a commercial InfoSec sellout. Yeah. You're doing that, to get paid. You're not doing it because that's what you love, right? And so that attitude is now long gone. But it reminds me, there's some people that can only be creative in coding when it suits them, and there's other people that can sit down, grind it out for 8 hours a day, right?
Yeah, but I've seen people who are creative, especially because they're limited to 8 hours. Like, you will burn out when you do over hours for too long. I wouldn't say like everyone who says I want a 9-to-5 job is not also loving their job.
So it brings up another thing, and this is a secret one I did not tell you about. But it's related, is the generalist versus the specialist. So how many here in the audience, show of hands, would you consider yourself a generalist? Raise your hand. Okay, now who considers themselves a specialist? Like you are the IDA Pro ninja. Oh, close to equal, maybe a few more generalists. And so for the longest time, the generalists, we were dying off. All the money was in specialization, right? How deep, how far you could get, how well you understood the technology really controlled your next paycheck. And the generalists kind of outclassed because they could never get that deep. And I think that's changed. Does anybody have a perspective on that?
I remember seeing a comment on LinkedIn about a person who was looking for a job, and he was sort of toning down this aspect of being a generalist. And he was saying, I feel myself as a generalist. I'm good for those hard-to-fill positions. I don't think is a negative aspect at all. I mean, having deep generalists in key positions now is much needed because we have good specialists. We've been having good specialists. Now we need to sort of glue them together in a strategic way.
So this reminded me of talk you and your research, where effectively the idea was that you can either be a generalist or a specialist, but if you are going for a specialist position, you're pinpointed focused. And that does not mean that it is going to run the entire thing. To run the entire company, you not only need pinpointed focus, you need generalists. And now more than ever, we need more generalists around. So yeah, journalist is a way that people should be looking for. And the other angle of it is, and including the part about working 9 to 5 and investing time in other things, creative process can also draw inspirations which are not from InfoSec world. You do gardening, you do something else, and that can give you the inspiration to do better job in your current work area. So being a journalist, being able to explore other areas could be another good thing. It's not like this is something you should not be doing.
I'm sort of surprised at the audience response because I know plenty of people that have shifted slightly throughout their career. So I'm really surprised that there were so many people who said, I'm a specialist, but I wonder whether if they look at their career, whether they have done different versions of a thing and therefore also have this broader skill set.
You could ask them the question.
Yeah.
Is that the case, or have you just been, how many people have been doing the same specific area of work throughout their career?
2, 3,
Fewer.
4, yeah.
There's a
not many.
GDB people.
Yeah.
No offense.
Okay, so we're going to move on to the next subject, and then we'll move it to audience questions. And this is kind of a perennial centralization versus decentralization question, right? By centralizing, you get economies of scale, you get efficiencies, you get one spot to monitor. I think I made the comment yesterday when Russia invaded Ukraine, and Ukraine has certain infrastructure on Microsoft. Russia now has to battle in Microsoft's territory, right? That's great in the sense that, those economies of scale and centralization for their infrastructure. But you also have these very convenient places to be regulated, right? When everybody ran a mail server, harder. If there's like 5 dominant mail servers and they get some order to filter, nobody can ever send email to China or something, well, now it's convenient for regulation. Centralization breeds, I guess, what lawyers would call an attractive nuisance. It's very attractive to regulate it. So I'm curious on the audience's thought. We always, the internet was sort of began decentralized, economic models forced centralization. Is there any hope for decentralization? The thing people point to is DNS, but look at what's happened there. Quad 1, Quad 8, right? I mean, it's centralized again, right? Even time services are centralizing, right? So should we get over that? Should we stop telling these myths of the internet being designed to withstand nuclear war, or should we actively be trying to create more decentralization? I know you've got a thought.
I mainly want more people to go decentralized.
Yeah. The hacker in me wants decentralization. I want people to have autonomy over their data and over their servers, and maybe internet speeds have gotten so great that the benefits of centralization have decreased to the point where it's less noticeable. Like in the olden days, it was very noticeable, but maybe we're fast enough.
I mean, there's multiple angles. One, the internet speed has increased. It gave more access to people. Resources are more prominently available. What I don't expect is everyone in the world running their own websites. That's impossible. But people who are technically capable, right now running a web server from your home on a Raspberry Pi is not a problematic affair. It's like you spend a few hours, you can get things moving. Exploration, the whole creative aspect, that could be the input. The indie web, the whole idea about setting your own websites, having your own blog, not being controlled by a central authority with the whole moderation in picture, is what excites me personally.
But it's dangerous. I mean, if you forget to apply security updates, in the end, like, you might lose your data. And
but
I can now choose, do I give all my data, I don't know, to Microsoft, Google, Apple, or do I host it on my own? And now I have to check every day, is there a security update? Have I been breached? Is my data now, like, not with the big companies, but did it not get to anyone else?
Maybe if more people self-host, it will auto-check for updates faster, and it will update
There's
itself.
one other angle around it. It's the cynical in us which says, hey, I'll get hacked. I'll get compromised. Things are going to go bad. when we are going towards centralization, are we 100% sure things are not going bad there? We have examples where cloud service providers
Yes.
with the whole responsibility matrix
like this one
were
big
running
breach.
like 5-year-old software.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not like just moving the responsibility on the other side is just going to cover everything.
Jeff, I think you have somewhat romantic ideas, haven't you, about grassroots
I do.
uprising.
I am a sucker for the grassroots uprising. And it could be from reading, what is it, the Shockwave Writer or Neuromancer or whatever it is, the early days. It was very kind of romantic, right? The power of the individual. And in the early days, the individuals made the largest contributions,
Yeah.
right? The breakthroughs. And I remember years ago, I was talking to some of the, if you remember, the cypherpunks were this kind of movement of kind of punk cryptographers in the Bay Area that really moved the needle on privacy and anonymity. And then it died out as the dot-com bubble grew and they got jobs and things became more commercialized. But I remember talking to one about 10 years ago and I said, I want to cause I want to be chaotic. Like, what can I do as an individual? Can I run a remailer? Do I run Tor nodes? Like, what do I do if I want to? And they said, everything's done in teams now. You need like a team of people to develop the software. Like the time of the individual making a big contribution to privacy or security is kind of over. And that really depressed me for about 3 or 4 years. And now I realize, no, they're wrong. Some of the contributions are still being made
By the individuals.
by individuals. Yeah.
It is much harder now, though, to just do your own thing.
And it's more based on luck, I think. You're sort of at the right place at the right time when people need that thing that you've built.
Sure.
The other angle is the PR part. Mastodon existed, got the PR when some other disaster happened.
Yeah.
So the people were working on it. It's not like no one else was working on it. The work was going on. It was not promoted. It was not publicized.
Yeah, so we're talking about Mastodon, the most popular version of a federated service, right, on the activity pub protocol. But it's been around for 5 years.
Yeah.
And only until somebody starts mismanaging Twitter do waves of people look for an alternative, a plan B.
Yep.
And there it is, plan B, and all of a sudden they have their moment.
Yeah.
But for 5 years, they were definitely not having their moment.
Yeah, because neither they were interested in promoting it, nor anyone else was interested or incentivized to actually talk about it.
But they kept working on it despite.
Yeah, they were still working because they liked working on it. So they
exactly.
were working on it.
Right, but now they're going to have like 3 years of development in the next 6 months. I mean, they're going to get so much attention, right? But is that then the dawning of a potential movement toward decentralization? Somebody will improve on that. Some VCs in the Valley will say, I'll do a better job, or is this just like the one-off weird mutation, and then we'll go back to when the next person who runs Twitter who's saying, right, we all go back to our centralized ways.
When the next person buys Facebook or LinkedIn.
Yeah. Yeah, because I worry about centralization around DNS. You can't do much about routing, but you have centralization around RPKI, and or the holders of the keys that control RPKI. And it's just there's the trade-off and there's the regulation, and I just feel like what can we do for our own plan B, or do we just say, you know what, there's no more plan B, we're just on whatever?
I mean, like I said about Mastodon, you need to keep making efforts, or the entire activity pub protocol, because there's so many softwares around it. The part about incentive or internal incentive comes into picture. Mm-hmm. If you feel that you have something that's different, work on it.
Well, so the
Keep
thing,
working.
And we're not going to beat this to the dead horse, but the interesting thing, for example, with Mastodon is there's a lack of an algorithm, right? So if Twitter or social media is optimized to generate interactivity, that algorithm is missing. So then what happens? With it missing, how do people behave differently, right? So it's not a race to get the maximum likes. It's not constructing an attractive post that gets you the most retweets or whatever. It's different. And the downside, though, is there's no monetization, there's no influencers, there's nobody to get paid, and there's no way for the administrators of these servers to get paid yet. So I have a feeling we'll see if a decentralized model can work, we'll see introduction of some monetization so server operators can get paid, because not getting paid means there's a million teeny instances. If you can get paid, there'll be larger, better, more professionally run instances. And if you can monetize content providers somehow, then you'll have professional creatives coming in more likely to share. So, and if you can do that without the toxicity of the algorithm, then I think you have a viable
That's
platform.
a good thing. Yeah.
I'd like to see something that incentivizes administrators of Mastodon nodes to host good services, because now they're not getting paid. Essentially, they do it for free just because they want their own instances. Maybe another spin on the monetization aspect is not only on the content production aspect, but also on the platform and infrastructure management, which...
Good question. By show of hands, who here runs any kind of service? So for example, DEF CON, we run Tor nodes, and we run a forum for over 20 years. Okay, who runs something that helps the community? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, about 20. Thank you for that. Everybody who's taking advantage, give them a round of applause. That's right. I think that's the way forward, right? The people who want to can provide the services.